As a kid, the monster under my bed was my dad. My father, Vincent, physically and sexually abused me and my sister. When my dad wanted you to stay in his room that night, you would go catch fireflies with him beforehand, and that's how you knew it was your turn. The night that Chris had killed Vincent, it was Vicky's turn to stay in Vincent's room. I was listening to music upstairs, trying not to think about what was happening to Vicky downstairs. I remember my older sister waking me up in the middle of the night to tell me that Vincent was dead. I remember seeing Vincent's body. We were all screaming at each other. I can even remember the smell in the house. It smelled like a hospital. Chris turned himself into the police. When Chris had gotten arrested, Vincent's mom, my grandma, said she was going to make sure Chris got the death penalty.
After Christopher was arrested for Vincent McDormand's killing, he was given 2 options.
It was either the death sentence or a plea deal of 1,800 years, so he took the plea deal.
For the last 18 years, Bennett has been behind bars.
This experience has affected me in so many ways. As a result, I turned into a clean freak. I'm very skittish around new people. I still can't stand looking at fireflies to this day. I hold immense guilt for Chris being in prison. Sometimes I think that if I wasn't born, that Chris wouldn't have had to do that. I just miss him so much, and I really want him home.
You feel guilty because he gave up his life to set you guys free from this predator that was molesting you, abusing you, hurting you. And instead of allowing that to continue, he took steps to stop it. And people can say, well, that's one way, but call CPS. But the fact of the matter is that had been done, right?
Yes.
CPS had been called not once, not twice, 3 times, more times, that this had been reported, and nobody believed it.
Yeah, we actually had a lot of CPS workers. They would either call our dad to let him know that they would be coming out because they had gotten a phone call, or they would just call him and say, okay, well, we got another phone call. We just have to say that we touched base with you, and then they would never show up. And when they did come, they wouldn't talk to us like individually. They wouldn't talk with us about what was going on. They just walked in the house, looked around, and then would leave.
That's really odd. And I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sorry that you've had to live with the aftermath and the fallout of all of this. What do you remember about your childhood?
Being in fear a lot of the time. I remember asking my older sister, we was upstairs in the bedroom, in her bedroom, and I remember telling her that I just couldn't handle it anymore. I remember telling her that we needed to get out. We tried running away from the home. We always ended up back there. But if we went to go tell anybody about what happened, our dad would threaten to have CPS put us in foster care and separate us so we couldn't see each other again.
I was 6 years old the night Chris shot Vincent. I remember being abused earlier in the night. I don't remember the gunshot. I don't remember Chris ever being there. I remember my sister waking me up and telling me I had to get up because Dad's head exploded. I thought his head had exploded because he was mad at me. I remember seeing his brains everywhere and crying. And then we heard banging on the door. It turned out it was the rescue squad, and they got us out of the house. The abuse has had major effects on me in my life. I felt like I was damaged. Once I got to high school, I just kept pushing people away until I felt really isolated. I would go to school drunk. I won't date people. I can't sleep in the same bed as any of my male partners. I have a recurrent nightmare. It starts off with me with my mother, and we're playing, and then Vince walks down the stairs, and he tells me that I have to go upstairs with him or I'm not gonna get to see my mother again. Work definitely fills the void for me. I consider myself a workaholic. I have a bachelor's degree in software engineering. I've been thinking about going to get my master's in cybersecurity just because it'll be something to distract me with. I feel a lot of guilt about Chris being in prison. Even though Chris killed my father, He's my hero. He saved me and gave me a chance at a future.
Were you guys shocked when the sentence was handed down? 1,800 years. I mean, we're in the year 2021, so that's almost as much time since Christ. It's like the history of mankind that your brother has been given to serve for killing a predator who was in the act of molesting you at the time.
My grandmother would tell us that he was either going to get the death sentence or he would never walk out of prison again. So when I was told he was never going to leave prison, I was prepared for it.
I talked with your sister Cassie about the monster under her bed and the things that this has done to her. You say you have night terrors about him to this day.
I do.
Tell me about those.
So the main one that I've had since even living with my grandmother after it happened was I'd be downstairs playing with my mom, and all of a sudden Vince will walk down the stairs and tell me I have to go back up with him or I'm not going to get to see my mom anymore. And then he would drag me up the stairs, and then right when he's about to abuse me or molest me is normally when I wake up. And I've had that since I moved in with my grandmother. And I always felt like it makes it hard to sleep, but it makes it feel like he's still there and still haunting me.
Vincent was emotionally and verbally abusive. He was like a Jekyll and Hyde. Vincent abused me by belittling me, hitting me. He knocked out one of my teeth. He had us living in a remote part of town. He refused to let me have access to the car. He cut the phone lines off. I started to drink to be able to cope. That's when the abuse was happening with the girls. One time, my daughter showed me how red her genitals were. She told me that it felt like her father had been pinching her there. I called CPS to report this. CPS ignored the report. Another time, Viccy and Cassie's school bus driver tried to make a CPS report. Vincent put his hands between their legs on the bus. CPS didn't follow up. Viccy was going to tell her teacher on him, and he beat her very badly with a belt. I tried to report the abuse to the police and CPS 20 to 30 times. CPS ignored all the reports. I even asked them to put the kids into foster care, and they never listened. Everyone would take his word over mine on everything. I was in shock when the sentence came down. The turmoil I feel every day he's in prison is so painful. If I had been able to get the girls help, Chris would not be in prison. It feels like a nightmare that I can't wake up from.
I've been working in the criminal justice reform system for about 25 years. Without a doubt, this entire family has been dealt a very raw deal. I've read through numerous case files of Chris's. One of the biggest things that I saw that should have been used in Chris's defense was his psychological evaluation. If this psychological evaluation had been brought up, I feel like his entire sentencing would have been completely different. Instead of interviewing the sisters or anybody else to get a full picture of what might have been going on in that house, so in order to not be put to death by lethal injection, he accepted the plea deal. That sentencing is absolutely ridiculous. I absolutely believe that due to who Vincent was, he was a state employee. He came from a upper middle class family within the area. And I do think that has a lot to do with why Chris got such a large sentence. The family's had so much trauma. Somebody has to do something to help this family. And I made a promise that I will do everything in my power. My hope is that Chris will be set free and can reunite with his family and they can heal.
Well, Janet, thank you for being here, and thank you for your commitment to this whole process here.
Absolutely.
There was a psych evaluation that was done at the time that could have had serious mitigating effect on what took place. Just a few excerpts from that psych evaluation, it revealed that there was a chaotic childhood, that there was violence between the parents, that the parents divorced, that he was removed from mom's care at age 4 due to neglect. prolonged exposure to physical and sexual abuse from Vincent, loss of his brother, multiple head injuries, barely adequate living condition. I mean, just none of this was put before the court.
Exactly.
And so the judge who's rendering this sentence, he didn't have the full picture here.
No.
He didn't know that Libby had reported this 20 or 30 times and the system failed him. He didn't know what had happened with Viccy, what had happened with Cassie, what had happened with Chris. He didn't have any of that information.
He had nothing.
Chris spoke with me earlier this morning, and here's a portion of that conversation so you can hear from this young man. Chris, a little over 18 years ago, on the night of July 25th, 2003, you went to your stepfather's house and events occurred that resulted in you being sentenced to prison for 1,800 years. Can you tell me what happened that night in your own words?
I went there to get some money. That night, I actually went into the house. Once I got into the house, I stood in there for a little while in the hallway, and I was ready to turn back around. I'd actually started walking back down the hallway to leave the house, and then I'd heard my sister in there crying. So I turned back around, went back down to the hallway, and the bathroom light was shining into his bedroom. I seen him leaning over top of her with his hands between her legs. And it was my youngest sister. She was, I think she was 5 or 6 at the time. I started flipping out. I just started blacking out. The only thing I remember is raising the gun.
What did you perceive him as doing to your sister at the time?
My sister was telling him to leave her wee-wee alone. But, you know, that's what my sister's, the way they talked about themselves or whatever when they was younger. So he had his hands down between her legs, and he was over top of her. So I assumed that he was in there molesting her.
And which sister was this?
Viccy, my youngest sister.
Right.
The last thing I remember was raising the gun. When I came back around, I noticed I'd shot him. I went over. I went in and I checked on my sister. She went on back to sleep. She was all right, but she went back to sleep and left out of the house.
Had he done anything to you?
No, he used to come up to my room. Sorry about that. He used to come up to my bedroom when I was younger. So he would start tickling me at first. Then he would start grabbing down between my legs, and he would just be able to squeeze, and then he would rub, and sometimes he'd put his fingers in my mouth.
Cassie, Viccy, what do you say to them?
I wish I could have stopped it sooner. That's the only thing. If I could have stopped it sooner, I would have.
Do you want them to feel guilty?
No, I don't want y'all to feel guilty about anything. I want you to know how much I love y'all.
Chris, tell me you're going to survive in there while we're working on things out here.
Oh, I'm surviving. One thing about it, they can't break me in here.
I'm going to hold you to that, okay?
All right.
We're working on things out here, my friend. You hang in there and know that there are people out here that love you, care about you, and are working on this to try to get you out of there.
Thank you for doing this.
All right, well, I'm going to let you go, and I will be in touch. You will hear from me again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
They claimed their father molested them until...
Your brother shot your father and killed him.
He gave up everything to save us.
Tell me what happened that night.
He was over top of my youngest sister. The last thing I remember was raising the gun.
New Dr. Phil. Check your local listings.
Do you have a story or a question for me? Click the link in the description and tell me what in the world is going on.